Good afternoon and welcome to the Midday News. Here's what we have in the bulletin. NIA says gag clause by government on Integrity Commission investigation unjustified. Who's telling the truth? Conflicting reports into financial irregularities at Seaforth High School. And later in sports, Tallowers win opening CPL match of the season. Thank you for joining us. I'm Shane Masters and here are the details. Transparency watchdog National Integrity Action NIA has taken issue with the government's position not to comment on matters which are being investigated by the Integrity Commission. Information Minister Robert Morgan made the declaration at Wednesday's post-cabinet press briefing when asked if the government would say who are the 6 parliamentarians being investigated for illicit enrichment. Speaking on the morning agenda on Power 106, Principal Director of the NIA, Daniel Archer, says the position taken is a slap in the face of transparency. She says the way in which a common citizen is treated, the same should be for parliamentarians.
When an ordinary Jamaican is suspected by the Jamaica Constabulary Force and they believe that which you do is of some threat to national security or just mere suspicion, and they place you in a database permanently, in perpetuity, you can't come off, and you have what is called an adverse trace. How different it is, though, for our politicians when they are merely investigations, no convictions, no charges, but we can't even know their names.
She says there is no validation for the protection of the reputation of these individuals as there is a lack of accountability for parliamentarians.
This is of concern because it gives the impression that when the Integrity Commission launches an investigation and they're the only ones so mandated to do under the law, not even the JCF can go in and do it. It is an Integrity Commission that has the obligation to do that. And the public who may have that very information to assist them cannot hear that Tom Jones and Mary Sue are implicated and they may have the valid information to share. So let's not raise the specter of reputation at this time. The public purse and the image of transparency and accountability are just as important. And until we have a level playing field for everybody when it becomes who becomes suspicious or suspects, then I do not think it's credible to say that it's not broadcasted on the front page. Because when an ordinary Jamaican is implicated, they're not on the front page either. Nobody knows that they've been cleared of the suspicion of rape. Nobody knows that they've been cleared of the suspicion of theft.
There are conflicting reports on whether financial irregularities were found at the Seaforth High School in St. Thomas. In July, it was reported no financial irregularities were found at the school. However, the Board of Institution is now saying otherwise. Jamila Maitland reports.
There seems to be more questions than answers surrounding the dismissal of Seaforth High School Principal Calbert Thomas. Mr. Thomas was sent on leave in January after a Ministry of Education Region 2 financial report said he needed to give an account to the Board of Management regarding $21 million in unpaid non-statutory deductions withdrawn from teachers' salary. That report subsequently stated that after months of investigations, no financial irregularities were found. However, a latest release from the Board of Management at the institution says financial irregularities were indeed discovered in the investigation by the Education Ministry. In a release Wednesday afternoon, the school board said after learning of the irregularities, appropriate channels were used to review the findings, make recommendations, and treat with the concerned parties. But stakeholders of the institution are not letting up, calling the sacking of Mr. Thomas a coup.
If Mr. T is not back at school, we cannot promise normalcy. One person do not call the shot for everybody. The main stakeholder in all of this are the students, and they're the one that is suffering.
One of the concerned teachers says since Mr. Thomas was suspended in January, the school's population has dwindled. He says over 200 students have left the institution.
Every case justice must prevail. We can't see justice in this. And we can't even see transparency, because one of the questions asks, who voted on behalf of the teachers in a delicate matter where this is concerned? Because the teachers weren't consulted that something like this is happening. So who voted on behalf of the teachers? So you see, the approach is almost like a dictatorship approach. And if it can happen to the principal, it can happen to any one of us.
They're now appealing for the Education Ministry to step in and assist in clearing the debacle at the institution. In the meantime, the Board of Management of the Seaforth High School has denied claims that it failed to respond to the teachers' request for a meeting. It says 2 forms of communication were shared with the staff prior to the staging of the protest, the latest being a letter outlining the steps taken relative to the principal's dismissal. The board says it has proposed an August 30 date for a meeting with the staff. Jamila Maitland, TVJ News.
A Clarendon family has been plunged into mourning following the hit-and-run killing of a 34-year-old woman along the Bustamante bypass in the parish last night. But just 6 hours after that incident, another fatal accident ensued along the same highway. The details in this report. The first incident occurred sometime after 10 p.m. 34-year-old Stephanie and her spouse had just arrived home and exited a taxi. Immediately after the taxi drove off, an unidentified van hit the woman before speeding away from the scene. She died on the spot. Her boyfriend, who witnessed the gruesome incident, fears for the future of their children.
It's true. If you send me to prison, can't remember my baby mother. Bring my pregnant mother, where you go? My son, my girl, mother. When everybody have them for me, when I want them short, my pin them life short for a mother. The rest of the come from up before, cut the speed. You don't know what is what, cut the speed. You don't have to fly, because at night, you don't have to fly on the road. So. You don't know, I can have a baby put up on the road, you can kill it.
The second incident occurred around 4 a.m. along the same highway, about 50 meters from the deadly crash hours before. It's alleged that a 20-year-old Jamaica Defense Force soldier who was driving a Toyota Voxy motor vehicle ran into a mentally ill man. The man, who is still unidentified, died on the spot. The driver lost control of the vehicle, which flipped several times before landing in a drain. He was transported to a hospital where he is receiving treatment. Authorities are being called on to install more lights along the roadway to reduce the number of accidents.
You light they need it, of course. Maybe 1 and 2 camera can put on the light, put on the post, and you can create for light. Like probably have a camera probably and you see what last night. Every day they say them pictures are out there, everybody is improvement at all. Peer promises. And not to contact everybody to talk to the other side.
An American tourist was killed in a motor vehicle crash along the Queens Highway in St. Anne on Tuesday. The deceased has been identified as 32-year-old Gerald Donato of Dallas, Texas. The collision involved an ambulance and a white Mazda Demio motor car being driven by the tourist. A tow truck operator who was on the scene recounted the incident.
The white car is coming from Montego Bay, overtook a couple lines of vehicle. The ambulance is going to Montego Bay. The driver of the car is a tourist, so naturally he'll be driving on the right side of the road, and he thinks that that is the way to drive, but that ought not to be the way to drive. You drive on the left.
Mr. Donato was cut from the wreckage of the vehicle and was transported to hospital where he was pronounced dead. 2 people, including the driver of the ambulance, were injured and taken to hospital for treatment. The tow truck operator had this advice for business operators who rent cars to tourists.
If I go back to basics, where they put remember to drive on the left, because when tourists come and go in your car, them just naturally them start driving on the right.
An assistant commissioner of the Jamaica Fire Brigade, JFB, has been arrested and charged with attempted rape and sexual touching of a minor. He is Floyd McLean, in charge of the western region of the island at the JFB. Reports said that a 14-year-old girl was conducting voluntary service at the location in Montego Bay, St. James in July when she was assaulted by McLean. According to police reports, the Fire Brigade Assistant Commissioner hugged the teen and touched her on her bottom while at his office. It's understood that the underage girl pulled away. McLean then allegedly pulled her inside a bathroom where he founded her and attempted to have sexual intercourse with a minor. She resisted, went home and reported the matter to a relative. McLean was subsequently arrested on Tuesday and charged on Wednesday. One of Westmoreland's most wanted men, who was on bail and living in St. Elizabeth, was fatally shot last evening during a reported confrontation with the police. He is Vivian Godfrey, also known as Klansman. The police say they recovered an illegal firearm and several rounds of ammunition. It's reported that the police were in the Malvern area conducting an operation when they were confronted by Mr. Godfrey. He reportedly shot at the police. A shootout ensued and Mr. Godfrey was injured. He was recently offered bail in the Westmoreland Parish Court for murder. He later relocated to Malvern. This is the second wanted person from Westmoreland who was killed during confrontation with the security forces in St. Elizabeth this month. Time now for the top regional and international stories.
In the region, over 3,000 Haitians have fled the country since the start of the week following a surge in gang violence. Criminals looted and set fire to houses in the country's capital, causing several deaths. The Haitian Civil Protection Department is reporting that more Haitians are likely to follow. On the international scene, a Texas woman is charged for threatening to kill the judge overseeing Donald Trump's federal election interference case in Washington, D.C. Prosecutors say Abigail Jo Shry is accused of calling the chambers of Jamaican-born Judge Tanya Chutkan on August 5, leaving death threats in a voicemail. Prosecutors allege Shry also threatened to kill the judge if Trump doesn't get elected in 2024. She admitted to federal agents she made the call, but said she had no plans to carry out anything that she said. She's being held in detention pending trial, with a bond hearing set for September 13. And FBI and Saratoga County Sheriff's Office in New York are investigating the tampering of a railroad track. The FBI says an employee noticed the issue during a routine safety inspection. Authorities haven't released details on how the track was tampered with, except that it was done to deliberately derail a train. The FBI is offering a reward for anyone with information. And those were the top regional and international stories. I'm Hal Shane Burke.
And it's now time for the Business Minute.
Energy solutions company Tropical Batteries saw a drop in profit for its third quarter ended June. After tax, the company made $38.8 million versus $53.8 million for the similar period last year. The quarter's performance brought 9-month net earnings to $132.8 million, a decline compared to last year's 9-month results. The company says higher administration, marketing and selling expenses accounted for the lower profit outturn. Tropical Batteries' total earnings came to $782.8 million. This reflected an 18% improvement over last year's $661 million. Further afield, the world now has about 3.5 million fewer millionaires. In its annual Global Wealth Report, Credit Suisse and UBS reported the total of all the private wealth in the world last year was more than $454 trillion. The 2.4% drop was due to climbing interest rates and higher inflation rates. According to the report, that left only about 60 million millionaires. The US alone lost nearly 2 million millionaires. The report says the top 1% of the households still hold a staggering 44.5% of all global wealth. And that's it for the Business Minute. I'm Hal Shane Burke.
And we head to a quick break. When we come back, we'll have your midday sports report.